Hello to Pioneer viewers. Today we are here again with a report on Russia-Ukraine war. We will discuss the development in detail in a moment. As we have stated in many of our reports, war is a struggle that can be won by many different components working on harmony. If there is a disharmony between the components, the victory of an army will not be possible. Just as important so as ordination is called from the past mistakes. If these mistakes are not addressed, they can be repeated and lead to major problems. Throughout the Ukrainian and Russian war, we see that the Russian army did not learn from its mistakes and repeated the same mistakes over and over again. In this process, the Ukrainian army does not miss this opportunity. Recently, the Russian military convoy was hit again. The Ukrainian army destroyed many military and ammunition belonging to the Russian troops with a highly successful operation. So what are the details of the operation? Let's take a look at developments together. As the Pioneer team, we continue to bring you developments regarding Russia-Ukraine war. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so as not to miss our daily map reports and reports on the agenda. I also read all your comments on our content. Please continue to express your opinions about our content in the comments. Let's start if you are ready, the Pioneer reports. The Ukrainian army's war strategy seems to have been quite effective since the inception. Russian troops are suffering serious losses in many areas. The Ukrainian armed forces are effectively targeting both the Russian troops on the front line and the Russian troops behind the front line. This makes it almost impossible for the Russian troops to recover on the front line. We recently reported that the Ukrainian army destroyed a convoy of the Russian army. Such deployment operations are of utmost strategic importance. Without adequate security, an army can suffer huge losses or even be destroyed. Throughout history, armies have set traps along the routes of deployments in order to weaken the enemy's forces and thus gain an advantage during the main battle. The Ukrainian army is observing the ongoing chances on the development new strategies to end the Russian occupation. The Russian army, however, is in a different situation. Many Russian commanders are reluctant to abandon traditional tactics. This is leading the Russian army towards the serious catastrophe. Recently, the Ukrainian army once again destroyed a Russian military convoy in a critical offensive. However, a series of critical steps were taken before this operation took place. The non-leaking of the operation was critical to prevent from the Russian convoy from changing its route. Ukrainian intelligence units carried out a highly effective operation. In addition to successfully breaking the encrypted communications of the Russian army, they also obtained important information during the interrogation of recently surrendered Russian soldiers. This information showed that the Russian army was planning a new deployment to the Donetsk front line. Taking swift actions, Ukrainian military intelligence organized an intensive reconnaissance missions to the Russian border. These reconnaissance teams tried to determine the route of movement of the Russian troops by monitoring mobility along the border. The data obtained was incorporated into the process of verifying and analyzing existing information by the Ukrainian military intelligence. The Ukrainian military focused on meticulous planning of every detail, not relying solely on luck. After intensive and meticulous follow-up, Ukrainian reconnaissance team confirmed the data provided by the Ukrainian military intelligence. According to these data, a large convoy of the Russian army was traveling along the specified routes towards the Donetsk front line. The convoy consisted not only of soldiers but also of armored vehicles and tanks, thus positioning a critical threat to the balance of power on the Donetsk front line. Once the verification process was completed, the Ukrainian military began to formulate their strategic plan on how to carry out the operation. Firstly, unmanned aerial vehicle began to carefully monitor the convoy's routes at the moment. At the same time, the drones played an important role in identifying important points of the convoy and detecting possible targets. Faced with the huge convoy of the Russian army, the number of Ukrainian army drones was less than the number of the vehicles in the convoy. In this situation, it was critical to identify the targets where the greatest damage could be inflicted by drone strikes. The drone operators identified 3 strategic targets within the long convoy. These targets were at the front, middle, and the end of the convoy. These targets were chosen to maximize the impact of the drone strikes on the convoy. As a result of the dives carried out by the kamikaze drones on these 3 targets, all 3 targets were successfully hit, followed by large explosions. Later, long-range missiles fired from Ukrainian positions allegedly hit the convoy. It is also stated that ATGM missiles were actively used during the attacks. According to information from sources in the region, it is reported that the convoy of the Russian army suffered great losses. However, since there has no been statements from the official sources so far, Russian official sources, of course, the accuracy of this information is not certain. Local sources, on the other hand, don't provide any information about the number of Russian soldiers in the convoy and destroyed, so it is not possible to draw a clear picture of the losses. According to reports, it is stated that the Ukrainian troops that stopped the Russian shipment to the Donetsk front line were the Bulava unit. The assets of the Russian army destroyed during the operation are reported as follows: 5 armored personnel carriers, 7 BMP armored vehicles, and 3 tanks. The public in Russia is experiencing a great shock in the face of the losses of the Russian army. The losses over the last 2 months exceeded even those suffered by the Ukrainian army during the 3-month summer offensives. However, the problems in the Russian army are not limited to casualties. Internal unrest is also increasing. In recent days, an incident in the Russian army attracted attention. It is turned out that the personnel of the Wagner Group who took part in the Russian army at the beginning of the war and achieved many successes were still on active duty. The achievements of the Wagner personnel caused great anger among the other Russian soldiers. Some sources claim that the tension between Wagner personnel on active duty and other Russian soldiers are increasing. According to the latest reports from one of our sources, an incredible incident took place between some Russian army personnel and Wagner personnel. Russian soldiers beat a Wagner staff member for hours and then left the area, leaving him at a tent. According to the allegations, Wagner personnel told the Russian soldiers, "You're nothing without us. You would all be dead. We will be back soon." When the Russian soldiers attacked the Wagner staff, other Wagner members pursued the Russian soldiers as soon as they learned of the incident. After brutally beating the captured Russian soldiers, they fled their headquarters, taking their wounded comrades with them. Allegedly, efforts to find the Wagner members continue. Now tell me, what do you think? Do you think the Ukrainian army's attacks behind the front line are sufficient? Do you think the weaknesses in the Russian army had increased recently? Do you think that the Ukrainian army will organize more attacks behind the front line? Let me know in the comments. I read and care about all your comments.